The Burrow Kingdom by Stephen Lee Beck, a short story of my own creation inspired by George R. R. Martin and Brandon Sanderson. A prologue. In the shining city of Burrow's Deep, Archmaester Gerald the Beloved ruled the city with stern inclinations. The Queen Amani, a small, wild creature of a child at 8 years old, had no interest in ruling the realm. Her father, the late Bertram II, had potential to be a great king, but met an untimely fate. Under the banner of the Archmaester, 9 members of the King's Guard served with great honor. There were, of course, the Crimson Knight, the Diamond Knight, the Obsidian Knight, the Emerald Knight, the Uranium Knight, the Silver Knight, the Sapphire Knight, the Ruby Knight, and the Amber Knight. All of these knights ruled over and managed different parts of the city in the name of the realm. The Obsidian Knight was charged with holding the inner walls of the keep, the Diamond Knight the lower walls. The Crimson Knight was to hold the Sanctuary Church, an old, reliable former keep turned church. The Emerald Knight was charged with holding the small vassal city of Burrowsdale, a subsequent lesser township that sprung off the Knight of the great keep nearby. The Ruby Knight was charged with holding the Towers of the South. The Uranium Knight was placed in charge of the Undergrove, a large cavernous wasteland of old Burrow's Deep, the city before the current. The Silver Knight was charged with protecting the keep of Burrow, the main castle within the city against the sea. The Amber Knight and the Ruby Knight were charged in the protecting of the citadel of the upper city, where new recruits and new acolytes joined, trained, and were molded into useful men. The Sapphire Knight was put in charge of the eastern plains toward the mountain of King Bertram I. All of these knights had, of course, more responsibilities outside of this. Their main and final task was to serve the current ruler of Burrow's Deep and the monarch, the Queen, Amani. However, with Queen Amani being 8 years old and uninterested in her title, the Archmaester Gerald has been lifted beyond his station to current ruler and regent of the throne of the Burrow. Burrow's Deep was an old town, Burrow's Deep was an old town, home to migrants but also full of a rich lore of history. Its first ruler was the Lord Burrow Baranor. The line of Burrow Baranor had unfortunately gone extinct as of 272 years ago, with its last ruler, Burrow the 11th, the Unyielding. He met his end at the Battle of Holm, trying to reclaim the lost lands of the Kingdom of Burrow, but was struck in the stomach by a mighty lashing from a sword known as Storm Song. This blade was wielded by a divine creature named Nagus Lowborn. He found this blade to not kill him instantly, but instead infect the mighty king with a mystic sickness, only known as the Mist Plague. Burrow the 11th died a few weeks later because of this accursed plague, leading to a call of loyal bannermen to put forth votes in the choosing ceremony known simply as the Gathering of the Great Lords, wherein which the great lords of each major settlement came together to decide the fate of the newly emptied throne and the newly kingless kingdom. The great lord of Holm, Lucarda Holmborn, the great lord of Plankytown, Balthamar Ironmantle, the great lord of Pick Peak, the former steward, Trimmer Randale, and the lord of Faraway, Rymer Errol, the lord of Burrowsdale, and the brother to Rymar, Hugor Errol, as well as the lesser lords of Tiembre and Rassilon, Bellicor Shepherdmane, and Ultagor Rassilon, respectively. The lord of the North Hearth, Orthel Torrent, and warden of the East March, as well as several hundred landless knights, including the Knight of Clovers, Owen Greybeard, the Squirrely Knight, Pharaoh and Godspear, and Lady Bria, the Unmaid of Coppergrove, were all in attendance. The lords of the realm gathered in attendance outside of the great hall in the citadel, a larger complex allowing for hundreds of people to be gathered together. The house flag of the Burrow, a mole upon a brown field with the blue moon of the realm behind, flew overhead the citadel at the gathering. The current steward of the realm, Aenor Crowblood, a lesser brother of a small noble house of the city, stood before the rest of the lords of the realm, beckoning for the noise of the room to become silenced. It is with great struggle. It is today we gather after many battles and long wars the realm has faced. The Burrow Kingdom has fallen to its greatest enemy, the greed of mankind, a powerful enemy that should never have been given the water and soil in which to grow. The great enemy commander, Nagus Lowborn, has been slain, but as you all know, he ended the line of Baranor. He ended our great King Burrow the 11th at only 22 years old. The king died heirless, and so this great council has been called to declare the new path forward for the Burrow. May I say, may all true men declare their loyalty to the rightful heir of these lands, Hugor Harold, Lord of Burrowsdale, and the great nephew of the late king. A negligible silence fell over the crowd, with murmurs starting to spread, when a small and young voice of the boy previously mentioned, Hugor, started to speak. He, with all of his might, said, my lords, I call upon you to take me as your king, and for our future to follow the destiny of our forebears. His half-brother and Lord of Faraway spoke up after this statement and jokingly rebutted, so you want us all to die on some field in the north, boy? I knew you when your mother was wiping your arse, so don't try to fool these noble lords into bowing to you. The crowd burst into laughter, with the young heir apparent aghast at his older half-brother. The Lord of Faraway, Rymar Errol, belched out, and if you lords and ladies are looking for a lawfully rightful older brother to take the place of a younger, weaker lad, then I'm the man who will lead the Burrow to greatness, and not in the direction of the Baranor line, right into the ground. And many of the lords started to shout, New King Rymar! New King Rymar! New King Rymar! And right back, a third of the lords chanted, Hugor for king! Hugor for king! Hugor is right! But while all this was happening, the great lords did not notice the begrudging stares from the landless knights, especially Owen Gracebeard, Pharaoh Godspear, and Lady Bria, who were all talking with a lesser lord, the Lord of Picked Peak, and former steward of the realm, Tremor Randale. As the shouting ceased into bleating debate from each side, Owen Gracebeard stepped forward. You both are too far removed from the king in the line of succession. Hugor said, He's not even in the line of succession. We share a father, but not a mother, and her birthright is the right to Burrowsteep and the kingdom. She is gone, but I hold her titles, and I am the rightful heir. Rymar proceeded to shout, Your mama didn't make you the lord of me before she died. He then spit at the boy prince. Owen Gracebeard said again, Both of you are still far from kingly men. There is only 2 men that have ruled over a kingdom before in our presence. The Lord Steward Aenor Crowblood and his predecessor Tremor Randale. Aenor is known to be a scholar and a great man, but a eunuch nonetheless. We don't want to be back here in 10 years. He may not be high-born enough either. Sorry, it's the truth of it, lad, turning to Aenor. But Tremor Randale is Lord of Picked Peak, from a noble house of the West, with ties to the Emperor of Manfall. His line was born in these lands, and he is a noble person and a great steward. He should serve as our king, and his sons after him. He is also a man grown, 33 years, married to the Lady Eliza Torrent of Northhearth, and they already have 3 healthy sons and 2 healthy daughters. They should rule over our land, and they will do it justly. Have faith. Slowly but surely, some of the landless knights and lesser lords took up the call of Trimmer for king. Trimmer for king! Trimmer for king! The shouting didn't cease this time, though. The House of Torrent and its lesser vassals began to take up the cry and their alliances as well. The nobles of Rassilon and Tiembray eventually fell to the cries, and finally the 3 possible heir to the kingdom walked up in front of the crowd. Aenor Crowblood silenced the crowd once again. "Very well, lords. If there are any other claimants, now is the time." The crowd falling silent without needing to be told so. Nobles and landless knights looked around. For a moment it looked as though Lucarda Holmborn might try to claim the throne for himself, but instead he relented and nodded to Rymar. "Very well. If no one else, then we should hold the vote and have a new king before the sun sets." The whole process took a long while. 3 types of weights were picked. If you chose Rymar, you placed a copper piece. If you chose Hugor, you placed an iron. And then finally, if you chose Tremor, you placed a silver piece. All noblemen were given the option set before them first before the landless knights and lower barons. When the tabulation counted all of the noblemen, it looked as though Rymar was winning, but Hugor was coming up very close. There were iron pieces and copper pieces, and about 1/5 of the pieces were silver. The noblemen sat back down, and finally the lower barons and landless knights began the slow process of voting. Aenor Crowblood placed a hand on the shoulder of the young Hugor and said, "Don't worry, lad. It will go one way or another, but it looks good for you." And the tabulation continued. For about 30 more minutes, the nobility began to become restless and were continually waiting on more and more landless knights to continue their endless voting. And finally, the chip was placed. A final chip, a silver piece on the pile of Tremor Randale. Aenor walked up to the table with the tabulations on it, and the Archmaester turned and said, It's Randale, sir." Aenor looked hopelessly at Hugor and frowned and shook his head. Aenor turned to the crowd and said, "All be seated. It has been a long and blistering day for all us to be here. A new king has been chose, to be crowned within the week. All bow to his lord of all of the Burrow, the new king in Burrow's Deep, the new king of all kind within the dominion of our dual sons, Tremor Randale, dual lord of Picked Peak and Burrow's Deep, king of all kind." Tremor bowed before everyone, and then the young boy Hugor slapped his older brother, Rymar, across the face. And before the crowd could stop him, Rymar shoved the end of his axe into the heart of Hugor. Aenor commanded a group of guardsmen to stop them, but it was too late. Rymar looked over the small, twitching corpse of Hugor, bloodied axe lodged in his chest. The crowd grew silent quickly as Tremor said, "Lord Rymar of Faraway has abdicated himself from honor. Bring him to the cells as he awaits trial." The Archmaester quickly placed a wrapped tarp of the body of Hugor, as 3 men helped the maester grab the corpse and lead it out of the citadel grounds. Tremor Randale, new king, looked at the grounds in disapproval as Rymar unquietly was taken away. A new day dawned. A new king donned in cape and crown.